You're listening to the RTI Press Pass powered by Rocky Top Insider.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass podcast. My name is Rick Butler. Join with me as always. That is Ryan Shumper in the top right of your screen, and that is Ryan Sylvia down there at the bottom. Thanks so much for tuning in. With only 2.5 weeks to go left in the season, things are starting to ramp up. Fall camp is sort of at the tail end of its slate, so obviously we have plenty to talk about today. It's going to be a big episode with, again, less than 3 weeks to go until the season. We're going to be talking about a little bit of a Tennessee schedule preview. We've got the game slate in front of us. We're going to be breaking down some of the matchups. We're going to be talking about win-loss records. Basically a little bit of what people are talking about right now that is on the schedule for today. Man, there's been a lot going on, guys. How are y'all doing?
Doing well. Yeah, it's getting closer and closer. We've been kicked out of practice for good. Tennessee will have its second scrimmage on Saturday, and it feels like at that point it's kind of, all eyes to Furman, which isn't obviously a super intriguing opener, but kind of all eyes to the start of the season and the game's getting started for good. So creeping closer and closer. Excited for kickoff, really, but still a little bit of time before then.
We're DeJuan Morris days away, 17 days away. So I'm excited. You can't be someone that follows Tennessee from a reporter perspective, from a fan perspective, from any perspective, and not get a little excited for football season. So I'm ready for them to get on the field against Furman and get football season rolling.
Yeah, that's obviously the straw that stirs the drink around here. And I know there's a lot of excitement for basketball season coming up in a couple months. And trust us, I think we're all equally excited for basketball season to come around with everything that's been happening with that offseason so far. But obviously football hits a little bit different. You got new players, you got new coaches, you got new uniforms coming in. So a lot that we've been talking about over the last couple months. But as you said, in 17 days, Ryan Sylvia, it all culminates with Tennessee's season opener against Furman in Neyland Stadium. As always, we want to encourage you guys to be checking out RockyTopInsider.com each and every day as we draw closer to this football season. We're going to be keeping you updated just like we have with everything that's going on with Tennessee, whether it is the latest injuries, the latest, I say practice reports. There's no more practice reports, but just some of the things that are coming out of the university, obviously news, awards, accolades, anything like that going on. And that leads me to my second point, which is to say, go ahead and subscribe to the Rocky Top Insider YouTube account. That's where you're watching this video right now, probably. If you're watching on podcast, welcome in. But YouTube is a great way to stay connected with Rocky Top Insider. I know fall camp is waning away, so we're going to have a little bit less of the player and coaches interviews, but we're still going to be bringing you Josh Heupel on Mondays, assistant coaches on Tuesdays. We're going to be breaking down the game after each game throughout the season with our stand-ups on the field. And, of course, you'll get the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass podcast. You'll get the Lowdown podcast with Bob Baskerville and Chris Lowe. That is coming back here shortly. I don't want to say too much about it, but stay tuned to things because the Lowdown is coming back. So make sure you are subscribed to the Rocky Top Insider YouTube channel. But again, RockyTopInsider.com. No paywall, just stories. We got everything you need to be covered over at RockyTopInsider.com. Guys, before we get into our season preview today, I do got the schedule pulled up. It's burning a hole in my computer, but the first thing that I want to talk about before we get into things real quick is just sort of the latest on Edrees Farooq. Ryan Sylvia and I have come to you twice on the RTI YouTube channel with just a couple of quick reaction breakdowns, one being from practice, the other being from a scrimmage. But as we know, and as you probably know by now, Tennessee safety Edrees Farooq out for the season. We've heard from his position coach about this now. Ryan Shumpert, I'll throw it over to you. Sort of what did Anthony Poindexter tell us about that group and that position as we head into, the game week just coming up here around the corner?
I think he, was surprisingly or, just kind of candid talking about it. And, I thought it was interesting that he not only said that, Edrees Farooq was going to be a starter for us, but said that he had started to separate himself separate himself from the other safeties on the team. So implying that he'd been the best safety on the team. But, he also gave more than just a generic, next man up mentality thing. He did say that, but he talked about the confidence in that room. The quote he had was, "I thought we had great depth before E went down. I thought we were just rotating. You had 6 guys rotating." And a little bit later on in the quote, "We still got some really good players in that room. We should be good enough to play good football and good solid pass defense and run defense with the guys we got left." So, I think it's definitely the optimism more than just saying next man up was, positive, interesting. And I thought the mention of 6 players that were already rotating, like it feels like, well, there's an unknown because past Deshaun Lane and TJ Metcalf, the guys in that room haven't played a whole lot of football. It does feel like there's some confidence in the young guys in that room and maybe some of the lower tier transfers Tennessee got in their ability to contribute this fall.
Sylvia, where are you at on things? Again, it was just about a week ago that we were standing here on this podcast talking about how we felt great about Tennessee's safety spots. We talked about Edrees Farooq being at the top of that list. Talked about Deshaun Lane and TJ Metcalf, how that being a really nice starting trio kind of heading into the season. No Edrees Farooq. Just sort of where are you in your feeling and I guess comfortability from where we were a week ago to where we are now, obviously, with the big news?
Well, it certainly feels like they lost, as Shumper was saying, their best safety, a guy that, as the coaches were saying, was probably the guy who's separating himself the most in the room. So from a perspective of the defense as a whole, I think it hurts in that way. But it's not like you have to completely throw out this season from a defensive perspective at the same time, because you did bring in Deshaun Lane, you did bring in TJ Metcalf. So you still have 2 starting caliber guys. They're both going to have to take a step. They're already going to be relied on a lot this season, but now they're both going to be asked to do a little bit more. And then it would be nice if you could get one other guy, one of the younger guys. I know they said you're rotating 6 before, so one of the 3 other guys that were in that rotation, if one of them could step up and be like a real nice piece that can get a handful of snaps every game in. But it certainly feels like it's setting up to just be a lot of TJ Metcalf and a lot of Deshaun Lane, which is something that Tennessee's done a good bit in the past as well, where you just kind of roll with 2 safeties. But I would guess the difference is also Jim Knowles' defense is very safety-led. It relies a lot on that position from a coordination standpoint of getting everyone on the same page, and then from a playmaking standpoint. So also might be a little bit different to be able to go 2 safeties in a Tim Banks defense compared to 2 safeties in a Jim Knowles defense. So I just think that'll be something to monitor throughout the year, and why I also think like it would be really nice if you get a 3rd guy that really cements himself in that rotation that you can really trust.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, Tennessee's had some season-ending injuries so far during fall camp so far. Jadis Richards, another defensive back. That one's tough to lose. Jaden Harmon, that one's tough to lose. But the Edrees Farooq one did feel like, on the day that the news came out, it did feel like it kind of sucked the wind out of the room a little bit. And it felt like, oh man, this is tough. And it took you, kind of a moment to settle into things. And I think that now, a week removed from that, I guess I feel a little bit better than I did maybe a week ago. But I also think that some of it was just because, again, that was a really deflating piece of news that came out. And again, for us, it was less than 24 hours after we talked about how optimistic we were about that room. So it was definitely a deflating one in the moment. And I think that, that's just sort of the beauty of the transfer portal right now, is that you can be entering a season with, at the time 3, but now 2 guys with not only experience, but different levels of experience and different types of experience. And that might have not been the same situation, just in sort of a next man up, who's on the roster the year before kind of situation. So there's no doubt that this is a big dent in Tennessee's defensive armor. But like you said, I think you just got to look at those top 2 guys. You got to see who can kind of give Tennessee something as that 3rd guy, no matter who it is. But, we'll see kind of what Tennessee rolls into it with. But I guess I feel a little bit better a week after, but just because, I think it was pretty deflating when we heard this come down last week.
Yeah, no doubt. And to Sylvia's point about, how much Tennessee's going to play, how many safeties they want to rotate compared to what they did in the past. According to PFF last year, Tennessee, which just does include Jalen McMurray as a star, Tennessee had 4 safeties play over 150 snaps. For Penn State, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It does seem like injuries played a role. One of those guys that only played in 8 games and was a little bit limited. And it could be the same type of deal where one of those guys was more of a nickel that's listed as a safety. So it seems like they rotated a little bit more last season at Penn State, but not like it was anything just radically different.
And I'm not including Jalen McMurray too, because then we're throwing in Quay Moss and stuff. So it's really, who was the fourth guy? I'm having a brain fart. If you still have it up,
the fourth guy was
or then the third
McMurray.
guy.
The third guy was Caleb Beasley.
Caleb Beasley. Okay, so yeah,
That's right.
Yeah, Beasley
there you go.
Like 280 snaps, I think.
So that's a little bit of an Edrees Farooq update. Tennessee will not have him for the season, but in that light, let's go ahead and look at the season. Again, I was telling you the schedule has been burning a hole in my computer screen ever since we knew that we wanted to have this podcast right here, talk about this 12-game schedule, the new 9-game SEC schedule. I feel like it's been a long time since this news came out. Now it's finally here in front of us. Tennessee's got their 3 non-conference games to start things off the bat, and then you move into it. A 9-game conference slate. Here's a little bit of an overview of it. Tennessee will have 4 preseason AP-ranked opponents. They'll take on number 5 Texas, number 13 Alabama, number 8 Texas A&M, and number 11 LSU. If I was a betting man, I would bet that all 4 of those teams are still ranked when Tennessee gets to that particular matchup. Maybe not, depending on based on Sylvia's reaction right there. We'll get into it. And then 4 more of those teams received votes in the process. I know one was Georgia Tech. I believe one was Auburn. I believe another one was South Carolina. And I think the other one was Vanderbilt. So Kentucky and Arkansas and Mississippi State, I guess, the only SEC teams who did not receive any votes. So there you go. 4 ranked teams, 4 that receive votes. Tennessee comes in at number 20 in the polls. Saturday, September 5th, we are back in Neyland Stadium. Tennessee takes on Furman. We don't really need to go with a win-loss projection here, so I'll kind of start with the quarterback competition. When Tennessee hits the field to take on Furman, we know that Jake Garcia will be the Paladin starting quarterback. Ryan Sylvia, I'll start with you. Who leads Tennessee out of the gates against Furman coming up on the 5th?
I'd still go Faison Brandon. Again, I've been on the Faison train since the spring, so feels like you just kind of have to stick that out at this point, especially with all the buzz coming out of spring camp. There's still been jockeying for position at the beginning of fall camp, but then it felt like the general thought out of that first scrimmage was not that George did bad by any means, but that Faison had himself a good day. And so I guess we put all that together. I still feel like that's the option with the most upside. And when you're picking between 2 young guys, I think you more so go towards the upside unless one's just really consistently killing it and the other one that maybe has the higher upside is a lot more volatile. It feels like they've both been pretty comparable though. So I still lean Faison Brandon.
Yeah, I'm with Sylvia. I think it'll be Faison. For really all the reasons he said, it's going to be in some ways, not 100%, but in some ways, it's a multi-year decision, not just a one-season decision. And I do think it'll be interesting to see, especially in the Furman game, how much George McIntyre plays. I'm sure he's going to play some. If Tennessee's up 49-0 in the second quarter, like they often are in these games, is Tennessee going to want to just force feed Faison Brandon as many reps as possible? Is he going to keep on playing in the third quarter, the entire third quarter, or are they going to go to George McIntyre? And then when they do go to George McIntyre, do you play Ryan Staub any after that? This is kind of the 1 of 2 games Staub realistically could get in. And I think Staub. What he's not a senior, is he? Am I mistaken about that? I think
he's a 4th-year senior, so he'll have that 5th year.
That's correct.
Yeah. So, I think there's a real chance Ryan Staub's their backup next season. I think, and he's gotten experience in Colorado, so it's not like he would just has to get some college experience this year, but I think it does make sense to want to play him. So, more so than just who is the starter, because I would be surprised at this point if it's not Faison Brandon. I'll be very curious to see how Josh Heupel handles the reps and getting those guys, playing time in the opener against the Paladins.
Yeah, I think that throughout the preseason so far, I've tried to temper my prediction a little bit, leaning towards Faison. I think that, as we sit here on the 19th, I think I'm more comfortable than I've been over the last couple of weeks in saying that it is Faison Brandon. We didn't get to see anything from scrimmage, but just some of the word that was coming out, I think, leads you to believe that. And again, we talked about it a lot over the last few episodes. We can't garner too much from what the three of us have seen on the practice field. But I think that what I have been able to garner from that, though, is that there's just a lot of athleticism and upside to Faison Brandon's game. And again, that's not to say anything bad about George McIntyre, but I do lean Faison Brandon more confidently than I have in the past. That needle is a good bit more on his side there, but I think Shump's right. What is things going to look like in terms of reps and split time in that Furman game? No disrespect to the Paladins and the Shumpert family's ties to the Paladins, but I think that this is a game where you try to do everything you can to get the ball in the end zone in as many ways as possible, simply because of how this schedule sets up. You got Georgia Tech in week 2. Not only is it, a Power 4 foe there, but you're going to them. It's a night game. You want to be on your P's and Q's when you head into Atlanta. I just think that, in a ton of ways, you want to be able to have as much game, readiness possible. You want to go through as many things as you can with those quarterbacks, and that includes trying to see how these guys can get into the end zone. So that's kind of my thought there. I don't know about you guys, but I think it's probably easier to go to George McIntyre or to go to Faison Brandon from George McIntyre. If you start with McIntyre, I think it might be a little bit easier to move to Brandon as opposed to starting with Brandon and moving to McIntyre. So if Josh Heupel comes out, sometime in the next, 7 or 10 days or so, and he names Faison Brandon the starter, I think that tells you a lot about what Tennessee wants to do at the position this year. If he names George McIntyre the starter, I'm still going to be sitting here thinking that, we could be up in the air as you move into week 2, possibly even week 3 as we go on. But that's the first game of the schedule. Everyone's got a good win there for Tennessee. Then you move into that aforementioned Georgia Tech game. Shump, what do you think about this one? Again, 7:00 p.m. in Atlanta. What's going on here as Tennessee kind of moves past this, tune-up game in week 1?
Yeah, I think it's a real test. Like, it's not a super marquee matchup. Georgia Tech's not supposed to be as good as they were the last 2 seasons, when they had Haynes King at quarterback and a ton of kind of talent around him offensively and a real offensive identity. But this has become a really solid program over the last couple of years under Brent Pry. And, I think the thing that will get tested is Tennessee's defensive line, and especially its run defense. Like, I think the pass rush, I just don't really see it. I don't really see the pass rush being very good. Can the defensive line hold up against the run? And can it play sound gap integrity football? Georgia Tech's going to test that early. So I'm picking Tennessee to win this game. I think they will, but by no means do I think this is going to be an easy win either. When you talk about first road start for Faison Brandon or George McIntyre, whoever it may be, and just a generally difficult, the road aspect of it. It's different because you're not at home. It's not familiar. I don't really worry about the environment as much. I'm sure there'll be a ton of Tennessee fans at Bobby Dodd Stadium, but it definitely adds an extra wrinkle.
Yeah, this is the classic measuring stick game for Tennessee, as far as you are not going to find much out about what you have at any position when you're playing Furman. Like, they're going to go out and act in defensively. They're going to keep it a 4-2-5 base for every single snap of the game. They're going to keep it vanilla and just out-athlete you. They're going to do the same thing on offense. They're not going to go too deep in their bag to try to throw some wrinkle in there unless they put something small on film to then counter it in the net. Like, it's all the games of you just don't want to show too much. You want to save it for that Georgia Tech game. So, like, when you get to Georgia Tech, yeah, you'll probably play a bunch of 3 linebacker looks that you didn't show at all in the Furman game. But I think you'll find out a lot about, 1, what you actually have in your quarterback option, and then 2, what you actually have in this Jim Knowles defense. And those, of course, have been the 2 big questions all offseason. Again, we're not going to get an answer to that really against Furman. We'll get an answer to that to a certain extent against Georgia Tech. You look to last year against Syracuse. We're all pretty confident about Tennessee's defense after 2024 going to that Syracuse game. And they didn't look too great against Syracuse, and that ended up being a trend throughout the season. So I'm not saying you can't bounce back and have a bad game against Georgia Tech and then finish the season strong, but at least gives you a little bit of an idea of where this team's actually going to stand with the question marks they have here. Still, I like Tennessee to win this game, but I'm not 100% like, yeah, this is a win, move on. Like, you certainly could go into Georgia Tech and lose this game.
Yeah, with all the conversation about the new 9-game SEC schedule, people want to talk about it. I think this Georgia Tech game got forgotten about for a lot of the offseason, and maybe not so much now because people are really starting to look into what Tennessee has in front of them, and I think everybody understands that that's the first real test for this quarterback battle. But again, I think for a lot of this offseason, people have really overlooked this Georgia Tech game, and then it got brought out that this game's going to be at 7 o'clock at night. Now, I don't think that Georgia Tech is going to be the most hostile environment that Tennessee has ever seen or will ever see by any stretch of the imagination. But again, it's still it's an early season, Power 4 opponent. There's a lot of new moving parts on this Tennessee team, whether it's the quarterback, whether it's the defensive scheme, whatever it is. And I think that Ryan Shumpert's right. I think a lot of this comes down to, what can Tennessee's defensive line show you in the process? I think that Tennessee's defensive line might not be all too tuned up, and the Vols can still win this game. I'm still going to predict a win for Tennessee, but I think you get a good look at maybe where the starting point is for this team. We talked a lot last year about just sort of different levels of starting points for different positions on this roster, and you could kind of track how they unfolded throughout the year. And so I think that for the defensive line, this is as good of a starting point as you're probably going to get to see what the baseline is and where they can go from there. So I think all of us are in agreement. Georgia Tech, sneaky game, give it a win. Last thought from Shump.
Yeah, I kind of twofold just the schedule-wise. Georgia Tech plays on Thursday night to open the season against Colorado. So, we'll learn probably more about Georgia Tech than we'll learn about Tennessee week 1. But Colorado also is supposed to be pretty bad again this year. I think they went 3-9 last year. I don't think expectations are all that different this season. So, we'll know more about them, but I'd say more than anything, we'll know if they're going to be bad. We'll know if it's a game Tennessee should absolutely win. If Georgia Tech loses or just doesn't look good in that game, I think that part will be interesting because Georgia Tech being a team that's playing Tennessee in week 2, you expect they're playing a Furman-like team in week 1, and they're not.
Yeah, that's a great point. And again, like you said, Thursday night, so not only is it going to be extended rest, but also Tennessee fans will be able to have their eye on that matchup. I'm sure we will be covering it to some degree as well to get a first look at what Tennessee's opponent looks like. Then you move into week 3, Saturday, September 19th, another night game for the Vols, 7:45, first night game in Neyland Stadium of the season. Jerry Mack returns to Neyland Stadium, Tennessee's former running back coach. Early in the Josh Heupel era, he is the head coach of the Owls. Guys, kind of another tune-up game, clean up the things from Georgia Tech. Don't look too far ahead to Texas, but again, this is kind of that final tune-up game of the year before you enter that gauntlet of a 9-game SEC stretch. Sylvia,
this is only an interesting game if Tennessee has quarterback struggles in the first 2, because then all of a sudden you're looking at this like, oh well, maybe you do need to play both of them and really figure things out before the 9-game SEC schedule starts. If you beat Furman like you're supposed to, if you go out and even just get okay quarterback play and beat Georgia Tech, there's not much of a storyline going into this besides, again, it's your last chance because of now the 9-game SEC schedule to really start to clear the benches, get that Ryan Staub, the Staub mob can go into full effect maybe in the 4th quarter. You can see some younger pieces out there. But besides that, unless things are going poorly, this shouldn't be much of a storyline.
Yeah, absolutely. Kennesaw State was a really cool story last year. Jerry Mack has did a great job there. Look, it is a testament to Josh Heupel that you just don't even if it is a really good lower tier team, you just don't really worry about them with Tennessee anymore. They've just dominated these games pretty consistently, and I don't expect this.
Unless you're Austin P.
Yeah, so it's a hilarious one that kind of wasn't the case because it was an FCS game. Would imagine the score might not be quite as crazy with it being a former Heupel assistant. I can see Heupel calling off the dogs. No onside kicks in the first half, up 28-0, or anything like that. But
gotta work on it.
Yeah, Tennessee has not one time ever under Josh Heupel kicked a surprise onside kick, unless I'm forgetting one. But they had to work on it against whoever that was, I think 2 years ago.
I can't remember. It was hilarious, though.
That was great. I'm with you guys. As long as quarterback's issue isn't as long as quarterback conversation isn't a worry. My biggest worry about this game is where I can potentially stop to get food at 2:30 in the morning, on my way home. It's
brutal. It's the night game. Brutal.
A late night, 7:45. No one's going to sleep early that night unless maybe you want to check out a little bit early. But things get reversed the next week when you start SEC play Saturday, September 26th against number 5 Texas. The Longhorns will be facing Ohio State in the second week of the season. So while it's not Georgia Tech, the Longhorns will be tested to a much larger degree than Tennessee will entering this early season SEC game. This one is 12 o'clock at noon. I know a lot of people were upset about this. I think we're all upset about this, just from football fans. This is the type of game that you want to see, later in the afternoon, under the lights, potentially even, but that's not what they get. Arch Manning and the Longhorns, Cam Coleman, Steve Sarkisian, everyone's coming to town. I believe this is maybe only the third or fourth matchup in program history against the Longhorns. So there's going to be a lot of hoopla about this game. There's going to be a lot of buzz around this game, especially if Texas beats Ohio State, Tennessee gets through Georgia Tech, and you're looking at 2 undefeated UTs heading into, a Neyland Stadium clash that I'm sure a lot of eyes will be on. Shump, where are you at with this? Obviously, Tennessee expected to be big underdogs probably heading into this matchup.
Yeah, touchdown underdogs, I think, is what they were early on DraftKings. This is Sylvia. Do you remember what the spread was in the Georgia-Tennessee game last year?
Oh God, I want to say, was that between like 7 and 10, maybe?
I don't even think it was that much. I'll let you look it up as I continue to go on with talking.
Yeah.
But to me, it feels like that game. And I don't really expect Tennessee to win, but they could come out and, play well and get the job done. But I just think Texas has such a good roster and a quarterback in Arch Manning who is battle tested after last year that, I'm going with the Longhorns in this one. I would pick something like 34-24 maybe, but I could see this. I don't think Tennessee's going to get their doors blown off or anything like that, but this is probably the best team Tennessee's going to play all year, and I don't expect them to pull off the upset.
Well, you got the numbers because I got them too.
It was 3.5 only for Georgia,
okay.
which
I thought it was
it's kind of starting to ring a bell now.
It opened at 7.5 on Sunday. It moved to 4.5.
Right.
It moved to 4.5 on Monday, and then it went to 3.5 on Tuesday. I'm not sure what it did after that, but it going from 7.5 to 4.5 in
it was that crazy movement. I do remember that now. Yeah.
Closed at 3.5.
It was huge.
I will say Google AI overview, just absolute dog trash as always.
Yeah. Shocking.
Saying Georgia was favored by 3.5 points, won the game 44-1 in overtime, covering the 3.5 point spread. Dog trash AI, as always. Anyway.
Yeah. Way to let them know.
Yeah, someone has to. I don't think Tennessee's going to win this game. I don't think Texas is as invincible as it kind of feels like right now going into the year in some ways because, as you mentioned, like there's plenty of star power there. And I think Sarkisian's a good college football coach. But they're not my pick to win the national championship or probably even the SEC. Are they going to be up there in the playoffs? Most likely. So am I completely ruling out Tennessee doesn't stand a chance? No, I think Tennessee stands a chance. I'm certainly not picking that though. I'll take Texas to win this game probably by a touchdown to 10 points, something where it's competitive for 4 quarters, but I don't think it's going to be an overtime win like Georgia had last year. It should be a little more comfortable for the Longhorns, but still a win.
I think I'm a little bit more pessimistic about this game, and maybe some other games will be a little bit more optimistic towards. I do like the Longhorns going into this year. I think they're going to have a really nasty passing attack. You bring in Cam Coleman, the transfer portal's best wide receiver. I think that Arch Manning looked really good in the final second half of that season. I think that they've put tools around him to continue to be good. Look, I agree with you guys. I don't think that Tennessee is going to win this game. I do think it could be a little bit more than that 7-10 range that you just put. But here's kind of the crux of it to me is that that secondary that we all talked about that we liked last week, I do think it's going to be put to the test here. One interesting note, though, is that Tennessee, it's got Kayin Lee, the Auburn transfer, who's probably got a lot of practice experience against Cam Coleman, the former Tigers wide receiver who moved to Texas during the offseason as well. So I don't know, like if you're anybody on the opposing sideline from Texas this year and you need somebody to, be able to cover that matchup, I would imagine that Kayin Lee, is the guy that you'd want from an experience standpoint. Now, obviously, there's better cornerbacks in the league, but I would imagine that those two guys had some battles down there on the plains in the last couple of years. I believe they spent 2 years together there in Auburn. So I'm with you on this guy. I'm with you on this one, guys. I do think it's maybe a little bit bigger of a loss. I don't think that speaks to Tennessee's season as a whole. I'm just a little bit maybe more high on the Longhorns and what Arch Manning can do with that offense. So, all right, 3-1 heading into the 5th week of the season. Tennessee stays at home. Holy cow, what a homecoming in Neyland Stadium. Tim Banks, Cody Burns, Alex Golesh, obviously, is the new head coach of the Tigers. Parker Ball, an assistant offensive line coach over there.
With two assistant
Tim
coaches,
Banks.
not the head coach.
I know.
Tim Banks, Cody Burns.
Yeah, you had to reach back for
You
Cody
should have
Burns
hit
as
Parker
well.
Ball, but you should have hit Parker Ball before Alex Golesh.
Man, Alex Golesh, they put out a video of him just really in a good way, just losing his mind on the practice field. It's revving those Tiger fans up. I believe this is the only back-to-back SEC home game that Tennessee will have. Auburn, a team, new head coach, Alex Golesh, plenty of familiarity with Josh Heupel and his staff, plenty of familiarity with what he wants to do on offense. We'll see if that sort of evolves a little bit in the first part of the season. But what do you guys think about this one? To me, this just kind of points to, one of those games of we've seen Tennessee be really good at home in the past. Last year was not up to those standards. If Tennessee wants to have a chance to be on the right side of their win-loss projection this year, you got to be able to win your home games. And I think this is kind of that first one that I look at and say, all right, if Tennessee wants to be, one of those competitive teams, I'm not even talking about for the playoffs, but just one of kind of the top half SEC teams, you've got to be able to win against a first-year head coach program on your home turf.
Yeah, I think everything you just said is completely accurate. Like, this is, I don't really know what to expect from Auburn. I think they're maybe one of the more volatile teams in the SEC this year, but it's just a game. Even if they do overachieve and they're pretty good, this is just a game at home you have to win. Like this, there's just no doubt about that. So, and then optically, like, it's a huge optics game for Josh Heupel. I mean, it's gonna get loud in a hurry if Tennessee loses this one, and assuming they lose to Texas, 2 weeks prior. And even if they don't lose to Texas, it's going to be, the noise will be different, but it's still going to be a lot of criticism on him. But I think Tennessee wins. I would, again, it's hard to say what Auburn's going to look like. I wouldn't say they're just going to destroy Auburn, but, I think they'll win somewhat comfortably. And I will say, like, we should learn some stuff about the Tigers beforehand. I mean, they play Baylor, Florida, and Vanderbilt all before Tennessee. So it's not like any of those opponents are just great, but we should have multiple games of kind of understanding what Auburn looks like and, kind of plenty of time to know what Byron Brown looks like as an SEC quarterback.
It's a little bit scary of a game to me. I think Tennessee wins, but the familiarity is a little spooky just because I think that probably favors the team that's the underdog, the new head coach at Auburn. Like, I feel like that probably plays in their favor a little bit. At the end of the day, you're right, though. Like, it's just a game Tennessee. It's a must. Probably of all the games, it's up there as far as, like, the must win. Like, besides the obvious, like, if you lose to Furman, that's obviously a must. But you know what I mean? Like, the SEC games, probably one of, if not the biggest must win, just because of the optics of your former offensive coordinator coming back to town. I feel like Auburn could look a little like Tennessee in 2021, where they can be a little boomer bust. They'll probably just outrace some other bottom SEC type of teams, and then they could look really competitive in the first half in Neyland, but then maybe the wheels start to fall off a little bit in the second half when depth starts to hit you in those type of things. So I think Tennessee's built to withstand it, but I wouldn't be surprised, I guess, if in a very 2021 Tennessee fashion, like, it's halftime and it's like, man, Tennessee's up 3. It's not the prettiest. They don't have a solution for this offensive something that Auburn's doing. In the second half, you can't batten down the hatches and win by a touchdown or 2 or 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, this one though, again, it I don't want to say trap game because I don't want to throw that around too loosely, but you look at Tennessee and it's not always just the losses to the ranked teams. You'll get those unranked losses thrown in, and I just wonder, how much of that could be in play for this one. Obviously, I think there's another unranked team that all of us kind of have our eyes on a little bit later in the schedule. So I think everyone's got to win there. So everyone's got Tennessee 4-1 heading into the 6th week of the season. The last time that Tennessee went to Fayetteville, Arkansas, two things happened. Number one, Tennessee lost the game and Arkansas stormed the field. Number two, Ryan and I might have gotten pulled over at about 3 o'clock at night trying to drive home. We won't get into that story. It wasn't for a bad reason. It was one of those routine checkups, why are you on the road at 3 a.m. kind of deals. But that was a tough situation. That was kind of just insult to injury, after everything that we had, kind of gone through the past 48 hours with the drive there, leading into the drive back. However, Tennessee was able to get their win back last year, although it was a lot closer than comfort would want you to be. A 34-31 win against Talon Green and the Razorbacks. Saturday, October 10th, Tennessee goes to Arkansas. I think Arkansas is really bad this year. I don't think there's too much that needs to be said about it. I think that Tennessee goes back to Fayetteville 2 years later and picks back up their win that they dropped 2 years ago.
I tend to agree. I think Arkansas will be the worst team in the SEC. If you made me pick one right now, I think it'll be the Razorbacks. So, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of bad memories for Tennessee from both 2 years ago and just in general. I mean, it's been I don't even know the last time.
They've been a thorn in the side.
Yeah, I know the last time Tennessee won in Fayetteville. I think they lost. They lost in 2006 there. They lost in 2011, 20.
2001.
Yeah, so, it's going to be 25 years. So I think it's, any fan that's like a little battered Vols syndrome going into this game, I get it, but it's just a game Tennessee, should not lose at all. Arkansas should be worse than they've been the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, they're awful.
Good. Yeah,
they should be awful. Kentucky would be the other option, I think.
Mississippi
as
State,
far as the worst teams in the SEC. Mississippi State's up there. I mean, I guess you have something going there as far as retention to some degree, but does that really mean anything if you've just been awful in the years that you've had that head coach? So yeah, it's a game they should win. They usually have one. They didn't have a road loss that wasn't inexplainable last year, but they had more losses than you'd like. But the historic Josh Heupel trend's been the road loss. That's kind of inexplainable. I don't think that'll be it this year. As far as if they do have one, I don't think it'll be the Arkansas game. Just kind of for all the reasons you guys hit on. It just doesn't seem like it's going to be that great of a football team. You just kind of have to get out of your own way. I think in this one, whichever quarterback it is, don't be turned over the football. Whatever defense it is, don't have a crazy missed assignment and give up an 80-yard touchdown for just play sound football and you should be fine.
Yeah, I'm with you there. All right, so at this point, Tennessee, 6th year under Josh Heupel, they are 5-1 heading into the 3rd Saturday in October. And as we record this on Wednesday afternoon, you may have seen the news, you may have missed the news. The color matchup is coming back. Tennessee will be wearing their home oranges, and Alabama will be wearing their home reds. Color on color, which I think a lot of people have been clamoring for. I think a lot of people have really wanted to see this back. What do you guys think about that, just first and foremost? Are you excited to see the return of the home jersey matchup?
Yeah, I am. It should. I mean, I think it looks really good, and I think UCLA and USC does that. I think it's really cool for a rivalry game. I think it should look awesome. So I'm excited for it.
It's just a very easy fan service thing to do when both parties are like, "Hey, let's do this," and you have the history to point back to of they used to do it all the time. Yeah, I mean, there was no reason they weren't doing it before anyway. So sure, let's do it.
So here's my thought process with this game. Obviously, going to be a big rivalry game. When I do these predictions, I'm sort of writing out a screenwriting script in my head, right? If something at the beginning changes, it's kind of going to mess up the rest of my projections moving forward. So as we sit here looking at Tennessee projecting 5-1 through the first 6 games of the season, I'm imagining that Tennessee's quarterback situation has sorted itself out. I'm imagining that Faison Brandon might not be playing otherworldly, but he's doing enough for Tennessee to stave off a home trap game against Auburn, to be able to take a team as a freshman into a place like Arkansas, even with the Razorbacks being bad, but not doing something to muck things up, and losing to the Razorbacks at that point. At this point in the season, 5-1, if I'm projecting that Faison Brandon is playing well, I'm going to beat Sylvia to the punch here. I don't know what Shump's going to do, but I'm going to beat Sylvia to the punch here, and I am going to chalk up a win. And again, if the quarterback play isn't as good, if things against Auburn don't go your way, if the Georgia Tech game presents you problems earlier in the year, then maybe this doesn't happen. But just sort of the way that I'm imagining how things play out in my head, I am going with Tennessee. And maybe it's just kind of a little bit of throwing caution to the wind with this one. But I don't know. Tennessee's won 2 in a row at home. I don't think that matters, right? But it's important to note because Tennessee fans are going to be revved up for this game. I would imagine that Tennessee pulls out the orange out for this game with the fans, and the fans are obviously going to be excited for it. And I'll kind of get y'all's opinion on how much you trust Alabama heading into the season. Personally, I think the preseason number 13 ranking might be a smidge inflated, but I am going to kind of beat Sylvia to the punch here and predict a win over Alabama just based on the way that I am, again, kind of writing this season to unfold, at least in my head as we do these projections. I hope that makes sense. This
is ludicrous that you're stealing my gig of picking Tennessee to beat Alabama. And I am picking Tennessee to beat Alabama because, again, I don't think Alabama's very good. I don't think they're very good. I don't think they were very good last year. And that sounds insane because they won a playoff game. But if you look at they were squeaking out wins over everyone. I don't think they're very good. I think there's a realistic chance this is the final year for Kalen DeBoer because I think they could be like an 8-4 team and people revolt there. And if you have 4 losses before too long, like that could really start to snowball. I don't know. I don't trust their quarterback situation. I don't trust the team as well. I just don't think that it's a very good team. I think they're fine. I don't think that they're going to be able to go into Neyland Stadium, especially if, and it's kind of what you're saying, Rick, like assuming Tennessee is at least steady at quarterback. It doesn't have to be fantastic play, but if they're steady at quarterback, assuming that they only have 1 loss at that point and it's the environment that you think it's going to be, I just don't trust this new Alabama quarterback who's probably pretty talented, but to go in and do much as far as putting up a big number like Bryce Young did going head-to-head with Tennessee in 2022 or something like that. I just don't think that's on the table. So I'm picking Tennessee to win this one, more so to me just because I don't think Alabama's that great of a football team this year. I think they're just fine.
I'm picking Tennessee as well. I mean, I don't.
Wow.
Y'all are acting this is shocking. I picked Tennessee to beat Alabama 2 years ago too. I think I pounded on the table that Tennessee was beating Alabama 2 years ago. So, I think one from the Alabama standpoint, brutal stretch of their schedule. They play Georgia the week before Tennessee, then they go to Tennessee, then they play A&M the week after Tennessee. I think it's an interesting spot where kind of it's contrary to what Sylvia said, and I don't necessarily disagree with him. But if you're Tennessee, I think you want Alabama to be undefeated coming into this game. I mean, they're 5 games before Georgia are East Carolina, Kentucky, Florida State, South Carolina, Mississippi State, and Georgia. I mean, they really shouldn't lose to anybody other than Georgia. South Carolina, I think, has some volatility, but that game's at home, so they probably should still win that one. And we've seen it. Like, if Alabama wins a big game, they typically play bad the next week. Like, that's been a common theme for Kalen DeBoer so far. So if Alabama can beat Georgia at home the week prior, I think it sets up really good for Tennessee. And I just don't think there's a ton of gap between these two teams. So I think the Vols will win a competitive game.
I'd say to your point too. Go ahead, Rick.
Well, no, go ahead because you're following up on him.
I was going to say with the schedule and how it lines up, like they quickly going through ECU, they're going to win. At Kentucky, they're going to win. Florida State, they should win. South Carolina, unless they're better than I think they're projected to be, then that should be a win. Mississippi State should be a win. So you're going to go into that stretch probably undefeated. Georgia at home, I think that's a loss. At Tennessee, we all think it's a loss. Against Texas A&M at home, I think it's a loss. At the point you've lost 3 straight games, if that's how that unfolds, and then you have to go at LSU. And I don't think LSU's the greatest team in the world either, but like that's a tough ask to come off of 3 straight losses and you have to turn it around and the fan base is going to be all over you at that point because of the expectations in Tuscaloosa. That could be a fourth straight loss. And then you have at Vanderbilt, Chattanooga, and Auburn left. At Vanderbilt, I don't think Vanderbilt's the best team either, but you already lost the last time you were in Nashville. And then Auburn, it's the Iron Bowl. Anything could happen. Like, it's not horribly unrealistic to be like, this team could be 7-5 and things if the wheels really fall off and they start stringing together losses in that 4-game stretch. But they could also be 10-2, and maybe I'm just completely wrong. And like last year, they find a way to win games that I thought they were going to lose, and they win by a possession, and they get over the hump. But to me, this feels like a year where you're probably looking at like an 8-4 Alabama team, and that's not acceptable there. And I'm really curious to see what that means for Kalen DeBoer.
With this game being at the halfway point of Tennessee's schedule, the first game on the back half of the 12 games, I think that Tennessee can be steady and get through that first half of the slate. And again, if they are, I think that they're in a position to win that game. And I think with some of the external factors that go into it, with what you guys are talking about, and just maybe that Alabama, they've obviously got a tough matchup before. They've got a tough matchup afterwards. Maybe Tennessee can go ahead and sneak one out if they are behind them in the rankings as, I guess an underdog in the rankings type of situation, and, do something that hasn't been done in a long time. And that's win 3 straight over Alabama in Neyland Stadium. Once you do that, though, you look down at the schedule and you're up to 6-1. And that to me is maybe gets to the point where I'm like, all right. What is going to happen here? Because in my heart of hearts, I don't really believe
the schedule's
that
just back
a playoff team. Exactly. I don't really believe that Tennessee's a playoff team this year. You move to South Carolina before we get to the bye week. Road game in Columbia. We know what happened the last time Tennessee was there. My gut, just kind of general instinct is this is the game that is on Tennessee's schedule each year, a road game, an opponent who maybe isn't as good as you or resembles you in some kind of way, and Tennessee does not step up to the challenge and loses. I'm not necessarily picking a loss right this second. What do you guys think about this one? That's just sort of where my gut is, especially coming off of an emotional win if you do beat Alabama the week before.
I think it's a loss.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a terrible spot.
I'm in the mode where it's like you got to find the losses because you're going through. If you go game by game, you're like Tennessee should be a favorite. I think Tennessee win this. Then all of a sudden, I'm sitting there like, man, this team's 10-2. I don't think this team's going 10-2 though. So you got to find a spot where they lose. I think we all agree. Like it just kind of, if you're going to pick them to beat Alabama, and you don't want them to go 10-2 or maybe even 9-3, like this is probably the one that makes the most sense as the trap game loss.
Yeah, I don't even think it's a trap game. Like, is Tennessee that much better than South Carolina? I mean, maybe. I mean, South Carolina's volatile.
If this game was at home, I would have absolutely no issue picking Tennessee 10 out of 10 times. Which to me tells me I think Tennessee's a decently better team than South Carolina is.
Yeah, I mean, from that logic, I agree. I mean, I don't know. I think South Carolina could be pretty good. They're coming off a bye game. Tennessee's playing their 8th straight game before an open date, as Rick said, especially if you're coming off an emotional win over Alabama. I think South Carolina's going to be solid this year. I do think they will be worse than Tennessee, but not a lot. And it's just like it's where you're saying if you're going game by game, you're picking all these wins. Like all these games are tight. There's just not. I think Georgia and Texas are the 2 best teams in the SEC, and I think there's teams, 3 through 12 are all pretty darn similar. There's not a huge gap between those teams. So with a tough place to play in Williams-Brice, Tennessee does avoid a night game, which is nice. But it just, to me, it just feels like a lot is working against Tennessee in this game, which I think is part of why it's so important that they beat Alabama, why they beat Auburn, why they beat Georgia Tech, because I think a lot of stuff is working against Tennessee. Even if they have a couple losses already at this point, and not if things are just going really well in the season and they're 6-1.
Yeah, Tennessee did not have that road stumble last year. Tennessee obviously got it done in overtime against Mississippi State. I think that was the closest one that it could have been. But even look back to the 2024 season, 10-2. It was the game against Arkansas that just kind of, the grass monster got him and tripped him up there. I think that if you're looking at this schedule right now, that to me, a little bit more than the Auburn game, because we talked about it. If you want to be a good team, you got to win your home games. I think that's the game that sticks out to me as, hey, I don't think Tennessee's making the playoffs, so I'm not going to get them to, like a 10-2 slate right now. So that game to me is the one that sticks out to say, hey, if history is kind of nudged me in any kind of direction, not necessarily written the book, but if history is kind of nudging me in any direction, it's saying find a road game that Tennessee is probably going to fall at. When the metrics maybe should tell them that they're not going to. So I think, interestingly, we're all in agreement over the last 2 games. I thought that's where maybe we would have a little bit of separation. Tennessee's got the bye week on Halloween night. Then you move into Saturday, November 7th. The Kentucky Wildcats come into town. Not believe, but I speculate that that's going to be Tennessee's dark mode game. I would imagine that has a decent chance of being in the evening or at night. I'd imagine it's going to be the blackout, the dark mode, all that kind of stuff. Again, not announced yet. Kentucky with the first-year head coach Will Stein. I think that it's a positive direction for the Wildcats program as a whole. I just don't think that this is the year where they walk into Neyland Stadium early November and be able to beat Tennessee in this environment. So I'm going to pick Tennessee here to knock off one of their 3 annual rivals. I guess the second of their 3 annual rivals.
Yeah, I agree. I think Will Stein, I think, was a good hire for Kentucky, and I think he has a chance to be pretty intriguing and be a thorn in Tennessee's side long term. But I just don't think this Kentucky roster is in a position this season to come into Knoxville and give the Vols a real challenge. If Tennessee's offense is as good as I think it can be by this point in the season, phase on Brandon, if he's just progressing like this should be a game where Tennessee scores a lot of points and puts up some really big numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat as far as, am I out on Will Stein as a head coach that could stick around Kentucky for a while? Not necessarily. I just think this current roster is awful, and I think they're probably the worst in the SEC this year. So I agree. Tennessee should run up the score. It should not be very close.
Saturday, November 14th, you're into the third to last week of the season. Tennessee goes on the road to number 8 Texas A&M. This is, again, if what we're saying about the last week is true, then this is going to be Tennessee's second straight blackout game, except on this one, you're on the opposite sideline of it. Expect Tennessee, I guess, to go with the Adidas Stormtroopers in this one. Texas A&M has already announced that they're doing their dark jerseys. They're doing their blackout mode at Kyle Field. Look, here, I'm not – Texas A&M had a lot of turnover this year from a player personnel standpoint. I'm not in the boat that they're a top 10 preseason team. I still think they're good. Like Ryan said, I think kind of they're in that next echelon of SEC teams who, kind of are all jumbled in that mix. I see why, they're probably at the topper half of that tier. So I'm not as high as Texas A&M as I think others are. That being said, I do not see, I'm not picking Tennessee to win this game. I just think that's going to be a really difficult road atmosphere. If I was an ESPN crew, I'd put that game on at night, depending, especially if Tennessee is 7-2 at this point in the season. You're going to have obviously 2 probably top 15-ish ranked teams. I just think that that's a challenging spot for Tennessee to go on the road. We know that Tennessee has struggled with road games in the past. I see a loss there.
Yeah, I'm with you. Really on everything you said, to be honest, Rick. Like, this is a brutal schedule for A&M. I'd be pretty shocked if they go 10-2 or better. Road trip to LSU, road trip to Alabama, road trip to South Carolina the week before, and then they close the year. Their last 3 games are Tennessee at home, at Oklahoma, and then they get the Longhorns at home Thanksgiving weekend. So, I'm not super high on this A&M team. Maybe some of it's just the bad taste that was left in the mouth from how poorly they finished last season. But it's still a good team. It's still a team that I think, almost to your point, Sylvia, I think is almost like Tennessee, South Carolina, I think is almost parallel to Tennessee A&M, where A&M, I think, is probably, all things equal, every schedule the same, a half a game to a game better than Tennessee. And given that they're at home, I think the Aggies will get the job done in this one. But I wouldn't completely punt on this, being a for sure loss for Tennessee either. And it'll be very interesting just because we haven't seen Tennessee play super well in these big road games in the past, but I also think A&M's not going to be as good as we typically think of, like the Georgia teams Tennessee's played in these big road games, or the Alabama teams Tennessee's played in these big road games.
In this spot.
So it'll be very curious just to see in general how Tennessee performs. I think it would almost be a positive sign in some ways that they just go out there and they're competitive and they don't, fall flat on their face like they have in so many of these big spots on the road.
Gives you a little bit more hope for the next game we'll talk about. But go ahead, Sylvia.
I am considerably higher on Texas A&M than you guys are. I think it's a really good team. I think Marcel Reed's a stud. I think he is a Heisman Trophy.
Do you think they're better than Texas?
I think they are. I think this. If Texas A&M didn't have the schedule, we just went through, and they're all playing 9 SEC games, and some are.
It's just a road schedule. It's horrible.
But yeah, I think Tennessee has a pretty easy 9-game SEC schedule as far as 9-game SEC schedule goes. Texas A&M has a pretty tough one. So, are they going to make it to the SEC championship? I'm not sure. I wouldn't want to see them in the playoffs, though. I think this team is actually pretty good, and so I really don't see much of a path for if Tennessee is how I think they'll be and Texas A&M is how I think they'll be. I don't see much of a path for Tennessee to win this game in College Station. Crazier things have happened, but I don't know. I'm high on Texas A&M. I think Marcel Reed's phenomenal. I think they have weapons around him. I think Mike Elko is a fantastic coach. I don't know. I get what you're saying where it's like they finished poorly last season. I think also part of it too is they seem to always kind of enter the preseason with this type of accolade of like, hey, they're a top 10 team, this and that. But I'm separating the Jimbo Fisher and previous A&M teams from this Mike Elko era. I think Mike Elko's a really good coach. I think they have a lot of talent. I think this is going to be a really good team.
I think that's fair, and I do think they're definitely way more competent under Mike Elko. I think last year my thing is they beat Notre Dame, which was a great win on the road early. They had an unbelievably easy schedule. They didn't beat anybody. Was Missouri their next best win? Like they didn't beat anybody. So the fact that to me they had one good win, they beat nobody else. They really weren't even that competitive against Texas. I mean, Texas was far better team in that game last year. And then they lose in the first round of the playoffs. Obviously, Miami went on a great run. It wasn't some terrible loss. But they lost by touchdown, but you watched that game, and that was not a game that – yeah. What they got stuffed on the goal line, four straight plays down there late when they were – yeah, they couldn't run. They couldn't move the ball, really. I think they had a couple big plays offensively. But so that's kind of where I'm at. I think in that way, maybe they're kind of a team I could see going either way because defensively they should be good. Marcel Reed's a veteran quarterback. They do have talent, to your point. I'm just not completely buying it. And again, maybe that's just because I have that too much emphasis on how they ended last season.
All right, so heading into the final 2 games of the stretch as we approach 1 hour here on the podcast. All of us have 7-3, with all of us having the same exact games. Texas is a loss, South Carolina is a loss, and at Texas A&M as a loss. Not jumping ahead of ourselves, we're still going to talk about it. I would imagine that all of us are going to pick Vanderbilt. So to me, this is kind of the game that decides if any of us differ on Tennessee's exact season schedule. I think that, Ryan, you and I have been doing this. This is our 6th year doing it. Sylvie, this is your 2nd year doing it with us. I can't remember a time where we've ever predicted the exact same schedule all the way down. And now here we are with 1 game-ish left to do so. We'll see if anybody's got any tricks up their sleeve with Vanderbilt. Saturday, November 21st, it is going to be a scorching hot ticket, especially as if Tennessee is in somewhat of a playoff race. They're at 3 losses. They can't afford another one. Lane Kiffin's return back to Knoxville as a head coach for the first time since that 2021 Ole Miss game. What are the Tigers going to be? I think that, to me, is one of the most interesting questions in college football as a whole this year. Sam Leavitt, Jordan Seaton, they obviously had some heavy hitters from the transfer portal. How much damage can they do in year 1 of the Lane Kiffin era? By this point in the season, we'll know. We'll know what LSU is going to be. So I think that this one to me is one of, if not the hardest games to kind of predict just because it's so far away. There's so many kind of questions on either side, some more important than others. Sylvia, I'll start with you. Where are you at with this LSU game in the penultimate week of the season?
I think LSU's pretty overrated. I think they're probably an 8-4 team. I could even see a world where they slip to 7-5 if they really can't pull off any big wins, because they have some tough games too. When you look at Ole Miss, when you look at home against A&M, when you look at you're hosting Alabama, you're playing Texas, you go on the road to Tennessee, like that's not the easiest non-game SEC schedule either. So I think this is a team that some losses could start to stack up. I mean, Lane Kiffin's a good college football coach. Like, I don't think anyone's denying that. With all the baggage that comes with it, though, with the drama this offseason, is Sam Leavitt going to look like he did 2 years ago in the playoff team, or is he going to look like he did even before he got hurt last year? Because even before he got hurt, it wasn't like he was tearing it up for Arizona State. So which Sam Leavitt are you going to get? Is a lot of the guys that you brought in through the transfer portal have baggage of their own. It just feels like there is a world where this really goes disastrously. I don't think it'll be a total disaster, but I don't think they're a top 10, top 15 team. I could see them finishing ranked 20 to 25 in the country, a receiving votes team. And I think Tennessee takes care of business at home and wins. And if we're just going straight up by our game-by-game prediction so far, that keeps Tennessee probably in somewhat of a playoff race, but we'll see how things kind of play out.
It would definitely. If everything goes to chalk like what you've kind of been saying, then you've got wins over Alabama and LSU, two ranked probably top 15
but then you're looking at
teams.
But if I'm looking at LSU, or I'm looking at LSU, that win does not feel as impactful as it does. Fair. And then, and also in my, the storytelling that we're doing, as you kind of go through the schedule, I'm also thinking they're probably not going to be very competitive in College Station.
Ryan, what say you?
Yeah, I'll pick LSU to win this game. I don't even really disagree with anything Sylvia said. I'm not like crazy high on the Tigers. To me, this game and Alabama both kind of feel like toss-ups. So I'm picking Tennessee to beat Alabama and drop this one. It is, if Tennessee were to go to win this game in that scenario that Sylvia's outlining, it would be really interesting. I mean, there's just going to be a bunch of SEC teams go 9-3, and one would think at least one of them is going to get in. If it's like Texas and Georgia go 10-2, and then 3 or 4 teams go 9-3, you would think at least one other one would get in. It's kind of hard to think it'd be Tennessee. Just how we look at these teams in the preseason, because of what Sylvia said. Like, Tennessee has a easier 9-game SEC schedule than some do. They get the more, they would probably need Georgia Tech to be a good team and prove to be like a really good win on the road. But again, as people has been a big talking point this week about preseason polls. We're not talking preseason polls, but we're talking about preseason expectations for these teams. All this stuff can radically change. So you want to get to 9-3 to at least give yourself a chance, even though I'm skeptical that would be enough for the Vols to get in the playoffs.
Man, I'm telling you right now, if Faison Brandon was able to beat, give me the name, Sam Leavitt in Knoxville late in the year with playoff implications on the line, it would be college football cinema. After everything that happened during the transfer portal with Sam Leavitt, Tennessee's desire to go out there and get him, and Lane Kiffin's fight to keep him, Lane Kiffin, who seemingly flew to Knoxville, right, to be able to intercept Sam Leavitt's camp at some point. Just sort of all these things that went on. Tennessee and LSU being two of, if not the two biggest suitors for Sam Leavitt. He goes to LSU. Tennessee says, all right, I guess we're going to stick with what we got. They choose the freshman quarterback who leads them to a 7-3 spot going into this game, and then beats not only the most controversial former Tennessee coach in history, but also the quarterback that got sort of swiped up by that coach to go to the other program. And again, doing this as a true freshman, it would be, first off, an unbelievable day for Tennessee to have so many bragging rights wrapped up into one. But it would be college football cinema in the day and age where the transfer portal storylines are so prevalent and so relevant and so interesting. It would be just an unbelievable story to have Tennessee go out there with a freshman quarterback, keep their playoff hopes alive to some degree by beating Lane Kiffin and the quarterback who chose Lane Kiffin's program over Tennessee's. That would be a wild moment of the season, at least to me, and I think to you guys as people who kind of have followed this story closely. That all being said, I am going to pick LSU. I think you guys are right. Like I don't see this game being too far difference and disadvantages, again, based on the way we're kind of projecting this season to go with our predictions. But I think that Ryan said it best. Sean, he said, I think that between this game and Alabama, you're probably not going to win both. You pick one to win, one to lose. To me, Alabama's the one that you win. LSU's the one that you lose. Tennessee comes up just short of kind of being in that playoff conversation. Not necessarily comes up just short of being in the playoffs, but at least in that conversation, because I agree with what you guys said a second ago. And then you still have a good one final chance to end your regular season on the right way, going back to Nashville, trying to get your win back against Vanderbilt that they picked up last year. And I am going to pick Tennessee to finish this season on the right note, at least in the regular season. Big rivalry game. I think that it stung for Tennessee last year, watching Vanderbilt do what they did to them in their own backyard to kind of, close down. There was a lot of high after Tennessee went into Gainesville and beat Florida. There was a lot of low after Tennessee let Vanderbilt come in and just stomp all over them. I will never forget being there in the corner of that field and seeing the congregation. It wasn't as close, but it kind of had vibes of when Tennessee was in LSU singing Rocky Top, except this was Vanderbilt game singing Rocky Top in Tennessee's Neyland Stadium. I think that, even in the world of a ton of new players and a ton of new coaches, I think that the ones who are here from the players and coaches, I think they remember that. I think they want to be able to end this season on the right note, unlike last year. I think they're able to go into Vanderbilt's house this time and get a win. And so that's how I'm closing the season. So for these last two games this season, I'm picking no to LSU, but yes for a win against Vanderbilt. Shump?
Yeah, I think Tennessee will win too. I do think this is a more tight game, or like it's more losable than people think. Like I guess just my general schedule thoughts for Tennessee. So I'm picking them to go 8-4. For them to go 9-3, I think it's winning 2 of those 3 home games against Alabama, Texas, LSU. So winning the LSU game that I picked them to lose. In Tennessee, I think it's extremely realistic path for them to go 7-5, and it's really just losing one of the Georgia Tech and Vanderbilt games on the road, which to me are both losable games, or heck, you could throw Auburn in there too, though I don't think that one's as likely. So I kind of go split the difference, go in the middle with 8-4, and I'll pick Tennessee to win this game. But I think this is, again, one of the games that could go either way.
Yeah, I think Vanderbilt takes a bit of a step back this year compared to last year, because obviously you don't have Diego Pavia. You don't have some of those star players around him either. And I don't think they'll be bad. I'm not saying they'll go back to Vanderbilt of old. To me, Jared Curtis, though, is a guy who's more so built to have a really good NFL career, but just kind of be good in college, if that makes sense. So I think while during his tenure, especially as a true freshman, they'll be fine. They'll be good. I think Tennessee should still be able to go in and win. I don't care how good Vanderbilt is, half the stadium plus will still be wearing orange when Tennessee goes and plays there. So it's not like it's going to be some daunting away field home advantage for Vanderbilt. I have Tennessee at 9-3. I don't feel good at all about that. It feels more like an 8-4 team. But then again, you go down the schedule and just the way it plays out, I think they have a shot to be a 9-3 team that is outside the playoff picture. I'm sure Josh Heupel will make his case in that Vanderbilt press conference and try to get his team in, and Tennessee fans will be real upset about being the 9-3 team and what I think we all kind of project a 9-3 log jam in the SEC that only 1 or 2 can get in from that spot. I just don't think, again, because of Tennessee's schedule, if teams are kind of what we think they are, that they'll have the best resume of that bunch. So I think you take that, though. You'll go to one of the better bowl games, whatever that means. And it's not a bad season at all for a first-year DC and a first-year quarterback.
Here's kind of one of my final overarching points on the season. Shump and I pick 8-4. Sylvia picks 9-3. I think we're all in agreement that this SEC schedule is not on the tougher end of some of these conference teams. So where can you take advantage of that schedule? You look at 3 teams on here: Auburn, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, at different points, but all first-year head coaches. I think you got to take advantage of the fact and figure out ways to beat all 3 of these first-year head coaches. Kentucky probably being the easiest one out of those, but that includes somebody who Tennessee is very familiar with Alex Golesh, and then who was the other one? Oh, and then Arkansas as well. I think that one is fair to say. And then you've also got a coach on the hot seat who, we'll see how much that either cools down or heats up as the season goes on. But that's Shane Beamer. All of us are predicting a little bit of a trap game in that one because of the scheduling placement. But I think there's opportunities for Tennessee to find advantages in this schedule to get on the right side again of sort of that early, preseason win-loss prediction. I think the first-year head coach's spot is a big one. Can't drop any of those games. Auburn being the most privy to that. But I think this is a season a schedule that shapes up for Tennessee to make a little bit of noise. Maybe it kind of crumbles late in the season. Maybe it solidifies late in the season if Tennessee can beat LSU, depending on what the Tigers are. But it's certainly never going to be a dull year, as we've come to expect.
No, not at all. It should be. I mean, you just go down these games. How many games we say that feel like they could go either way or very likely will be a point spread of a touchdown or less? Like it's there's plenty not to like about the professionalization of college football, but it's certainly starting to get the NFL vibe where it's, there's just not as big as a gap between most of these teams. Like Sylvia, you're talking about your national title who you picked to win the national title earlier. I was kind of thinking I think there's maybe 5 teams that separate themselves as being the most talented. And after that, it's like, I'm sure there's a gap between 6 and 25, but I'm not sure how big it is.
Here's 2 quickish questions on kind of your overarching view on Tennessee as well. Like I said, I'm way closer to 8-4 than I am to 10-3. As 8-4 guys, are you closer to 9-3 or 7-5?
Probably 7-5, because I feel like there's a couple of those sneaky games that could come up and bite you. Again, I'm predicting that Tennessee beats Alabama here in this situation. If that doesn't swing, that's a challenging opponent. If that doesn't go Tennessee's way, then that is kind of a knock back to 7-5 for me. I say that because at this point where we stand right now, it's a freshman quarterback. Maybe it's a sophomore quarterback. In my mind, it's a freshman quarterback. And it's a first-year scheme under Jim Knowles. Now, I think that Tennessee bucks the trend a little bit of some of these Jim Knowles historic first-year outputs that he's put out that people have, people have chalked up over the last couple months or so. But I think that because of some of those reasons, I think I might lean a little bit more towards 7-5 than I would to 9-3. But it's probably still pretty close either way.
Yeah, I would probably say 9-3, but I think it's close.
My other thought is this outside of the quarterback position, which of course is widely considered the most important position on the field. So take it as much as you want. Is this the best Tennessee roster Josh Heupel's had? I think it probably is.
No, I just think they're so bad on the defensive line that I can't say that it's their best roster.
I think it's their best offensive line. I think it's probably I don't think it's better than Princeton, Fant, Jacob Warren tight ends. I really like that tandem. I think it has a chance to be your best overall receiving core. I think it has a chance to be your best 3. Running back is tough because you had the really good 3-headed monster with Jalen Wright, Jabari Small, and a young Dylan Sampson. The Dylan Sampson was so special by himself that one year that gets tough. But defensively, I think this is the best secondary they've had. It's definitely the best linebacker core they've had. The defensive line would be the holdup to me, but still, I think you also have to give at least some credit to Jim Knowles and his track record as far as what he's been able to do in his career. And as Rick was saying too, I don't think that this is going to be as disastrous as some might have initially thought of, oh man, year one Jim Knowles is ugly and it's bad. By all accounts, they do not seem to have much of an issue installing this defense this offseason. Now, I don't think they're going to go in front of the media and be like, yeah, it's going horribly and everyone panic. But there does seem to be a level of confidence between players and coaches that you know what you're doing. It's not that difficult because of able to bring in other assistant coaches, able to bring in past players. I kind of like how this team forms, which is why I think if you just get a Faison Brandon or George McIntyre to play sound football, they don't have to go. Like Rick, you talked about if Faison Brandon goes out and kind of gunslings past Sam Levitt, that'd be a great storyline. I just don't think he has to do that because you're set up to run the ball really well. You're set up to kind of just find your receivers in space. And if you can just kind of get a game manager this year out of your young quarterback, that's why I feel like you could be fine. There's a path to nine wins, which you'll certainly take and sets up really nicely for a 2027.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can go through the position groups and I'd have to compare them all one by one, but I think you also have to look at it from a team aspect as well. How well does the team work together? Hendon Hooker had that 22 offense, completely buzzing. It elevated some of the other guys in that offense as well. So I think it's an interesting conversation. You know what I probably will do, because we're running long, I'll probably think about that over the next couple of days. I'll give you my answer on next week's episode of the RTI Press Pass. When we talk about some superlatives about this team, we give some bold predictions, we give some hot takes, we talk about predicting leaders and I guess I should say stat leaders about the team. Next week is kind of it's not going to be the game week podcast, but it is going to be sort of our last preseason podcast before things really start rolling. We'll get anything left that we have on our chest out during that episode, and hopefully we'll be able to talk about a starting quarterback being named. Guys, anything else on the way out before we wrap up what is probably going to be what is usually going to be the longest show of the year as we wrap up our season predictions?
I think we hit everything.
Yep.
All right, well, I'm going to fly through this then. You can follow Ryan Shumpert at Ryan Shumpert00. You can follow Ryan Sylvia at Ryan T. Sylvia. You can follow myself at Rick_Butler. Make sure you're checking out RockyTopInsider.com each and every day. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, and we are on every social media platform there is: Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Make sure to give us a follow before the season so you don't miss out on anything. Make sure you're also checking out our good friends over at WATE. Go ahead and download the WATE 6 Plus Smart TV app. You can find a lot of great sports coverage there and a lot of great local coverage there. If you're in the Knoxville and East Tennessee region, that is certainly one of the best places to go check in with just local news, notes, the happenings going on, and certainly some great sports coverage as well from WATE sports team over there. Guys, it's been a pleasure as always. This show is always one of my absolute favorites to do of the year. But for you, the audience, make sure you're subscribed and make sure you're checking out RockyTopInsider.com each and every day. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you back next week to wrap up the preseason.